Yeah, I left, let's see. Last year was like it was called exclustration. So because I had made final vows,
Mhm.
I I could have just like left right away, but because I had made that final commitment, I also had the option of doing like a period of discernment to make sure it was what I really wanted to do.
Mhm.
And so it could have been like any amount of time up to 3 years. Like at 3 years, they would have been like, okay, you gotta make up your mind.
Yeah.
But I felt like a year was good enough for me. So I just in September finished that 1 year of exclustration. So that would have been 2021 to 2022.
Mhm.
So I left, sort of technically in 2021. So
Okay.
like a year and a half ago.
Okay. So what does that mean? Does it mean you left the sisterhood or the church or
Yeah, I left religious life and yeah, it's interesting because I mean, touching upon one of your questions about like, tumultuous times and
yeah.
it wasn't like I wasn't worried about the future. I wasn't worried that like we didn't have a lot of women coming in because we still had women who were interested and women who were joining.
Mhm.
Um, and also like even if we got smaller, I was okay with that because it was like it had become so institutionalized because there were so many women. And then
Mm.
it was getting down to be more like a family. And so you actually had to like see each other on a regular basis and you couldn't just like go off to your wing.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, those things, it was more like my own personal life that I realized, and I don't know how much you want to go into this, but let me know when you want to ask a question. But just realized that even though it kind of like worked for me, it
Yeah.
wasn't life-giving for me.
Mm.
So I loved the community and I loved what I was doing,
Mhm.
but just on a daily basis, I didn't want to be involved in like the actual community life
Yeah.
of like the regular time for prayers and the regular time for mass and like regular time for eating. And it was just like it didn't fit my own rhythm. And it was like it felt stifling from the beginning. And I just was like, well, it'll change or it'll get better. And that's what everyone kept telling me. And it
Yeah.
never changed. It never got better. And I was like, and it was the pandemic really, because
Mhm.
all along I'd been making excuses like, well, I can't come to prayers today because I just got back into town, or I can't come because I have this young adult event.
Mhm.
And then when I had nothing to go to, I had no excuses. And I was like, I still don't want to go.
Yeah.
So I was like, I have to be honest with myself. Why? And is this really then the place that I'm supposed to be?
Did it feel like restrictive, sort of?
It's so weird because it did, but it wasn't. Like I did so many things that I never would have been able to do on my own. Like
Right.
I went to so many different countries and I got to go to so many different events and lead my own events and create my own events. Um, so I grew as a person, but there was like only a certain extent. Then it was like I had to grow in the way that other people wanted me to grow.
Mhm.
And so then when I left, it's been like, I just feel like anything is possible. Like I could do whatever I want and I'll enjoy it and I'll be great at it. And
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't feel that way before religious life. I was very insecure. I just didn't think like anything, like I could do anything on my own. I didn't think I could succeed at most things. And so I think religious life helped me believe in myself, but then it was still like, but we need you to do what we want you to do. And I was like, it worked, but it was like, it felt too small for me. And I was like, I think I'm bigger than this.
Yeah. What did they want you to do? Because were you still teaching?
Actually, so after teaching for 4 years, and this is where it's like, it was restricting, but wasn't because they wanted me to be doing something,
Yeah.
which makes sense. But after teaching for 4 years, they were like, now we want you to move somewhere else. We want you to get experience somewhere else, which there was wisdom in that.
Hmm.
Um, and they said, do you want to continue teaching or do you want to do something else? And I was like, I'm a little bit tired of teaching. I loved being in the classroom, but I didn't love like again, I don't like to feel like I'm restricted. And so being in the education system just felt very restricting for me. So I was like, I still want to work with young people. I love that energy. I love that population. And but I don't want to do like lesson plans and, post things and grade things. Like that was just no thanks. Yeah. So so I asked if I could do vocation work, which is more of like outreach and recruitment kind of stuff. So I would go to gatherings or like lead there was like a National Catholic Sisters Week, and so I would lead events and things for that. Um, and so that was my idea, and they agreed to it.
Mhm.
But it was like what I was doing was freeing, but the daily life for me was restricting. So like I couldn't live where I wanted. I couldn't like see my family anytime I wanted. I like couldn't get a dog, and those aren't all like huge things, but for me, it was a lifestyle then that I didn't have access to that I realized was the lifestyle I wanted. And
Mhm.
yeah, so it's like I don't think I can stay. Like it would be dishonest if I was like, well, I'm just gonna stay because I said yes, you know. Um, but it's like I have to say yes to my own call, which I feel like religious life, I needed to be there, but I couldn't stay there. And so then it was like the call continued in a different context. And
Yeah.
so now I live where I want, which is near my family. And now I have a dog, which is really hard actually, but it's what I wanted. It like gets me outside, it gets me moving, it gets me active, it gets me thinking. um yeah, it helps me understand better what it's like to have kids, even though I've never had kids. Like my landlady, she's like, no, having a puppy is very much like having a baby. And I was like, okay, that's good to know, because I felt like I was making a bigger deal out of it than it was, but now I know like it is hard. So yeah, it just like having to think of something that depends on me gives me a whole new perspective that I never would have had, because nothing really depended on me in religious life.
Yeah.
Um, and even like learning to sort of fend for myself. Like I had a lot of professional experiences in religious life, like, vocation work and like creating content and posting content, and I loved all that stuff. And so it's like, how can I find something else like that? But it was very hard to find a job. And budgeted like a certain amount, and I thought I would have a job by a certain time, and I didn't. And so then I was like, I'll just substitute teach for a while. And that didn't even pay half my rent. So I
Mhm.
was like, do I move in with my parents? But I didn't, I wanted to be able to like be my own person.
Right.
And I was like, I also just can't live with them. This is not happening. So, but it helped me see like how easy it is to experience unemployment. I was applying to jobs for months, and I started applying in August and didn't get any job offers until November.
Really?
So for someone who didn't have a job, it wasn't like I was just moving from one job to the other, but like I was moving across the country, which cost thousands of dollars. And then I was trying to find a new job. And yeah, so all that time. So then I didn't start until December. And it was like, it's half a year. Half a year. I didn't have like an actual income.
Wow. So what do you have a job right now? What's your
I
title?
do, and I love it. I got hired with Catholic Relief Services,
Wow.
and really the only like I'd only known of them through Rice Bowl. Remember we had them at the school,
Oh yes.
little,
Yeah.
like boxes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I remember.
Yeah. So I really had never heard of them before that, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And someone sent me, when I was looking for jobs, someone sent me a posting with them, and I was like, yeah, I would be interested in working. Like my job be supporting people, who need extra assistance.
Mhm.
And I love it. Like it actually, what I love about it is that it's not like, yes, it's about the people that we're trying to support, but it's also about the employees and how, like, what kind of support we need. So I just got a raise because, and I only started in December because
Congratulations.
thank you. But it was all my boss. She was like, you know, your resume was a one page, which you might have thought was what we wanted. And she's like, but I think you have a lot more job experience and I think you should be making more because you are valuable. And I was like, what? I was like, sure, pay me whatever,
Mhm.
but so I got an increase that I didn't even think I needed or deserved. And she's like, no, you are worth more than what they offered. And just like that I have a boss that would say something like that and then would pursue that and was like, if you want, you can resubmit your resume and I'll share it with, whatever. So it wasn't even like she made me do it. She just
Right.
asked me if I wanted to. And I was like, yeah. So yeah, I just feel like it's an organization that believes in people and that includes staff and then the people that we're working for.
Did you feel valued when you were a sister?
Oh, Sade, that's a great question. You know what? I have not even reflected on this, but I think maybe that's why it's such a big deal at Catholic Relief Services because as a sister, I felt valued because I was a sister. I didn't feel valued for being myself. And I think that was also part of why I left is I was like, it wasn't healthy for me to rely on that privilege and recognition for like being a symbol, and I didn't want to be a symbol anymore. If I was going to matter to anybody, I wanted it to be because it was me
Yeah.
and nothing else.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, thanks for helping me make that connection to
Okay, let's see. I have more questions. Mm. So, the number of women choosing to enter sisterhood has been declining for years. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because it's so restrictive? Do you think it's because women have more opportunity nowadays? What do you think?
Well, so one thing that I learned because part of that was my job was like looking at numbers and
Yeah.
how things were going. So I was in workshops and things. So one thing I learned was that actually religious life used to be much smaller. The
Mm.
numbers that we're seeing now, that was more like what it was before. And then just randomly, there was like this anomaly and this huge increase. And
Really?
so, yeah, so it used to just be like this steady, like, here we are at religious life. And then it was like a ton of people entered. And now we're going back down to that like steady, here we are in
Uh,
religious life. So the anomaly was most likely because there were less opportunities. And so, especially for women, and so women could actually be professionals and they could actually, support themselves and each other. And it was like, aside from like, all you could do was be a wife and a mother. And so then this provided you as a woman opportunities that, like, beyond being a wife and a mother. Um, because yeah, it was like either you don't get married and then you're like looked at as weird
yeah.
because you're not giving, the world children, or you give the world children. And so it was like you couldn't be a teacher, you couldn't be a doctor, you couldn't be a lawyer. And then suddenly there was a space where you could and you could be taken seriously. And so it was like, yes, we want to do that. And I think part of the decline is like you're saying now it's back to like where it was before, but it's also women are finding that they can be professionals and wives and mothers or not, and it's okay.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, the amount of opportunity that has changed the numbers, and then it just was kind of like never really like that before anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, like me, you're a woman of color, correct?
Yes. Happily so.
Yes. How was it like being a sister who was a woman of color? Did you ever face any like discrimination? Did you feel excluded? I know you well, I'll let you answer that first. Yeah.
um, yeah, I talk about this for a long time, but I think religious life was one of the first spaces where I did notice that I was othered. Like,
Yeah.
in high school, yes, but also you're just afraid of everything. And, everything seems like nobody likes me, and it could be any reason.
Right.
But in religious life, I stood out specifically because of my skin color. And so I noticed that, like, people would talk to me differently, or people would, like, I would stand out, and people were like, oh, I saw you at church the other day, but they didn't say that to the other sisters
Mm.
who kind of, like, I guess, blend in, because
Yeah.
most of them look alike, or most of them look like the parishioners.
Mhm.
And um most, like, for the most part, the sisters were not, like, they didn't really treat me any differently.
Mhm.
I did feel, but also part of it could have been my age, and that was another thing, was like I was also put up on a pedestal because I was young and I was a woman of color, and it was like, wow, there are not a lot of you, and so tell us everything. And I was like, ah. So, for a while I was like, sure, but then I hadn't really even reflected on my experiences as a woman of color in this, like, predominantly white space, where, like, anywhere I went, I was different.
Yeah.
And so, like, also experiences like going to Haiti, where I was American, but I was Black, and so the Haitians were like, you're white, but then, like, like, but I'm not, and then as I was out in the sun more, they're like, oh, no, no, you're like us, you're
You're like,
Haitian.
never mind.
Yeah. We'd take you. But also the way that they were able to, like, we could joke around, and we could, like, they could say things like that to me, and um we could talk about skin color. And so it was, even though people said it was going to be a culture shock to go to Haiti, it was actually a culture shock coming back, because then I was back to being like the different one. And in Haiti, it was like, oh, whoa, what's that white person doing here? So yeah, it was interesting. So just, I had a lot of experiences that I hadn't previously, to that pointed out, like, I had different experiences, and that I was experiencing religious life differently than my peers, because they were not women of color. Um, and then at times it made me angry, even though no one really treated me differently in community, but because they also didn't understand. And so, we'd have, like, workshops on race and racism, and they're like, oh yeah, like, the kids in my neighborhood were mean to me because I was Polish and not German. And I was like, oh, it's not really the same. So yeah, it was, so then those were the times where I had to, like, find my people, like, people that I could talk to who did understand, and say, like, yes, there, that's, like, the first stage of them, like, trying to say, oh yeah, we're the same.
Yeah.
And hopefully over time they realize, like, no, we're different, and we've had different experiences, and we always will, and that's okay. But it's important to acknowledge that. So yeah, people try to focus on sameness, and I was like,
Yeah.
learning that it was important to also accept and embrace the difference.
Exactly. Were
Mhm.
there any other sisters of color that you knew?
Um, very few. So one other sister that was, like, around my, I would say, like, peer group, she entered around the same time I did. She transferred actually from a different community. So she was from Africa, from Kenya originally. So we didn't, again, like, yes, we were, like, grouped together, but different experiences. She didn't grow up in the United States, like, it's very different. So people were like, actually one time wrote um a blog post about, like, a letter from the only African American Felician sister, and someone was like, but what about sister so and so? And I was like, "Oh, she's African."
African, not
Right.
African American.
Right. There, like, there's but again, that says, like, they didn't understand. They didn't know that there was even a difference. But how different our experiences are as an American and a Kenyan, like, so different. So yeah, it very interesting. So but so there was her, and then there was actually, so another sister that I lived with, her mom was from Trinidad and Tobago. And so we had that in common, but she was white passing because her family was, like, a lot lighter. I don't know that they maybe somewhere in their line like had someone of color in their family, um but she was also Cherokee, so she had her own like beautiful mixture and different experiences. And then there was like a Hispanic sister, like Chicana from California. But yeah, it's probably like the handful of us out of, and when I entered, there were like 750 Felician sisters.
Oh wow. I know you're pretty vocal on social media about your experiences and about racial injustice, especially during 2020 with Black Lives Matter movement.
Mhm.
Or did anyone else, any other sisters, were any of them vocal about that? Or did you receive backlash for sharing your thoughts? Or
Mhm.
is it supposed to be like hush hush, you're not supposed to talk about that?
Mhm.
Or do they embrace it?
I I would say I got like a varied responses. So I had a few sisters who were like, yes, thank you for speaking up, and would actually share some of my posts or share like the that blog that I mentioned. Um, but then, and no one really ever was like, don't say those things until some random person who saw my post on social media, like called the, we call it the provincial house, but it was like the mother house, but they called and they're like, you should know that she's posting these things. And they're like, maybe like, but then I went to a Black Lives Matter march, and a photographer got a picture of me, and they actually used it on the cover of one of our Felician magazines. So it was like they
Oh,
didn't really know how to talk about it, but they wanted to. And so that was like one of their ways of saying like we're trying. And so no one else was really that vocal, but that
yeah.
they didn't quiet me, or that some sisters would ask me and be like, well, what has it been like? Then that gave me hope, even though, it was like just a few, but it was still overall, I would say, accepted.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, that's good to hear that they were trying, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in general, like sisters, women who enter religious life, like they want to do things right. They want to do the good, whatever is the best. And so they try. They're learning. It's just like everybody.
They're all learning.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess now we can move on to critiquing the patriarchy. I actually spoke with Monica.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and she said that she does critique the patriarchy. So I was wondering what you think about that and if you critique the patriarchy in the church, in the Catholic Church,
Mhm.
or if you've had any experiences of sexism.
Mhm. Um, oh, I do have like one prominent experience that I remember just feeling like stung. And I don't remember, I was still a sister, and I think maybe I was a reader at Mass or something, and it was like a pretty big celebration. And so there were a lot of priests and bishops there. And at the end of Mass, like we all went and gathered in the room, and there were like maybe there was one other woman there, and I had no idea what we were doing, but none of them said anything. None of them were like, okay, now this is what, nothing. They just like gathered in their circle and did whatever they did. And I was like, okay, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
But, and then that was it. And no one really ever talked to me at all when we were getting ready. And it just a group of white men.
Yeah.
And we're all, these priests and deacons and some bishops. And then there was like one black priest. And he also, like I noticed, no one really ever talked to him.
Mm.
So so there's like racism and sexism that's just still dominates this like boys club. That was the first time that it felt to me like a boys club, and I was definitely not a part of it. And so after that I was like, I don't think I like this. um I just, it's hard to say that, especially now having been in religious life and now experiencing life, supporting myself and like having something that depends on me, it just opens up my experiences so much more, that it's like, how can one, or like mainly one type of person namely single white men, celibate, be the ones who make all the rules and tell us how everything should be.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're just getting a very narrow perspective on life here. So I have nothing against them, but I just think that it's going to continue to be narrow unless we do widen the perspectives and the leadership. So even if it's like, oh, we, let lay people do this, we let lay people do that, but I don't, I still don't think it's the same, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I question a lot of things. That's just how I am. But so I definitely do question, like, is this really the best model?
Yeah, it is the boys' club in a sense, and the church has had a super long history of sexism and treating women just not how they're supposed to be treated. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And I mean, right now I'm listening to, is it a love letter to brown girls with, I think it's like rough edges and tender hearts, just talking about how women have been vilified like every culture across every, so it's not unique to the Catholic Church, unfortunately, but I'm also glad that like it's not only the Catholic Church that it's like
Yeah.
this is just a problem in general. And but it's too bad that in a place where like that's supposed to be safe for humanity, it's not always safe for humanity, for
Yeah.
certain people in humanity.
Yes. Um, so you're young. When did you enter the sisterhood?
Yeah, I started around 21. So I entered like at 22.
Did you go to college?
Yeah, I just graduated and that fall I entered.
Oh.
So that would be like you entering
Yeah. I was
this fall.
um what drew you to the Catholic Church and wanting to become a sister, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to answer that in one way because now that I get to know myself better and like my desires and my fears, I think there was a lot more at play that I would have known. But in general, I I when I met the Felician sisters specifically, I loved that they were community and that they prayed together and that they were trying their best together and they were human, so they could still make mistakes or still have attitudes or still be cranky, but like they were loving God and they were trying to love people and like that's it,
Yeah.
and themselves. And so I was just drawn to their way of being and how they were human. But I think religious life in general was attractive to me ever since I was a kid because it was like the perfect way of being, to me, probably as a woman of color who was like scrutinized for everything, was like, well, this is the way that I could be good. And this is the way that I could be holy and accepted.
Mm.
And I don't know that all of that, I understood all of that until recently, but I was like, now, especially listening to this book, I'm like, there are so many ways I tried to conform, and no wonder I couldn't stay because it was like, I can't just be myself, like, and I think there are a lot of different ways I'm still discovering what that even means just to be myself. But yeah, I know also I was afraid of intimate relationships. I just like I had dated before, but I don't have a lot of good models in my own life. And so it's like, it's going to fail. It's not going to work. I'm going to be brokenhearted. And now I'm like, no, actually, if I wasn't afraid of that, that is what I would have chosen. So just, yeah, I think discovering more of who I am was what drew me away from religious life because it was like I went for reasons I didn't know at the time were to stifle me and my desires. And it was like, I can't do that anymore. So here I am.
So now you're like in this whole new sphere where you're learning about yourself and learning about who you are. Do you think you would, if you could go back in time, would you not become a sister?
if I would go back in time, I would do the same thing all over again because part of this self discovery is because of religious life, is because I had amazing women investing in me and my spiritual life and my professional life and great role models. And so, yeah, I don't think I could have gotten to this point without religious life, without the Felician sisters, but I also knew that I couldn't go any further. And
Yeah.
that was, yeah, now that's up to me and however God invites me to do that next.
Oh my, I'm so excited for you. And
Thank you.
did you receive any backlash from leaving?
No, actually, so many people were supportive. Even on social media, when I shared, everybody was like, this is courageous. It's hard to make life-changing decisions like this and to do it like in the spotlight because, you're sharing it with us here is a lot. And so, but I also didn't want it to just be like hush hush and like, oh, suddenly I'm gone. So,
Yeah.
you know, and that people would know like they too have permission to make life-changing decisions. And right, it's not easy, but it's possible and it's worth it. So yeah, but the sisters, it was sad, it was hard for the sisters and because there was nothing wrong. Like I wasn't unhappy, but I just wasn't fulfilled. And so to try and explain, like, I love you all and I love this life, but I don't love it for me was like, what? So, um, yeah, but there's still a few that I keep in touch with. Like, I'm going to go to Baltimore for work, and there's a sister who lives there, and we lived together once upon a time in California. And so I'm going to go stay with her a couple nights just to hang out.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. So I
Are you,
still got my sister friends.
yeah. Are you happier now than you were then?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I was still happy even in religious life, but it was like something was missing and now I feel like there's more meaning to my happiness. I don't know. I still don't know how to like describe the difference between the happiness I felt in religious life and the happiness I feel now,
Mm.
but it's like a wider happiness.
Mhm. I like that.